Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Wolf Returns. Blake Morrison had killed 37 men in his 12 years of Black Ops service. Each death calculated, precise, necessary. But none of those kills had prepared him for the voicemail that would change everything on his final day of deployment. The phone buzzed against his tactical vest as he finished his last patrol through the dusty streets of Kandahar. His daughter Luna's name flashed on the cracked screen. At 17, she rarely called during missions, understanding the dangers of communication in hostile territory. "Dad," Luna's voice cracked through static, terror bleeding through every syllable. "Mom's new husband is a cop. He's got the whole family at gunpoint. He said when you get here, he'll make me cuff you before he puts you down." Blake's blood turned to ice. The background noise confirmed she wasn't alone. Heavy breathing, shuffling feet, the distinct click of a service weapon being manipulated. "I swore I'd end him." Blake growled into the empty air, his knuckles white around the phone. Luna's sob cut through his rage like a blade. "And he made me. He made me burn all your pictures." The line went dead. Blake Morrison had been forged in the crucible of special operations, molded by years of wet work and psychological warfare. His marriage to Celia had been his anchor to humanity, Luna their shared masterpiece. But that anchor had been severed 8 months ago when Celia filed for divorce while he was deployed, claiming she'd fallen out of love and needed space to find herself. What she'd really found was Troy Kellner, a decorated police sergeant with the Denver PD. Blake had done his homework from overseas. Kellner was clean on paper, 20 years of service, commendations for bravery, even a heroism award for saving a child from a house fire. The perfect replacement for an absent soldier. But perfect men didn't hold families at gunpoint. Blake's commanding officer, Colonel Rodriguez, found him 20 minutes later, frantically booking flights on his encrypted laptop. "Morrison, what's the situation?" "Family emergency, sir. I need emergency leave." Rodriguez studied the cold fury in Blake's eyes that had stared down warlords and terrorists without flinching. "Approved. But Blake, whatever you're thinking, remember you're not in a war zone anymore." Blake shouldered his gear bag, his movements predatory and precise. "Actually, sir, I think I am." The flight to Denver was 18 hours of torment. Blake used every minute to plan, accessing classified databases he technically no longer had clearance for. Troy Kellner's life unfolded on his laptop screen like a tactical briefing. Born in small-town Colorado, high school football star, military police before joining Denver PD, divorced twice, both ex-wives citing controlling behavior, but no formal charges. 3 use of force investigations, all cleared. A pattern of aggression wrapped in blue brotherhood protection. More disturbing were the gaps, periods where Kellner's activities went dark, off-duty time unaccounted for. Blake's trained eye spotted the inconsistencies that civilian oversight had missed. This wasn't just a dirty cop. This was a predator who'd learned to hunt within the system. Blake's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Soldier boy coming home? Your family is very comfortable. Don't do anything stupid." Attached was a photo of Luna zip-tied to a chair, tears streaming down her face. Blake forwarded the image to his handler at the Defense Intelligence Agency with a single message: "Going dark. Protect my assets." The reply came instantly: "Negative. Stand down." Blake powered off the phone and removed the battery. The United States Army had trained him to be a ghost, to move through enemy territory without detection, to eliminate threats with surgical precision. They'd created the perfect weapon. They'd forgotten to build in an off switch. Chapter 2. The Hunter's Moon. Blake landed in Denver at 2,347 hours, his body clock irrelevant after years of operating across time zones. The airport was a maze of late-night travelers and security checkpoints, but Blake moved through it like smoke, his training allowing him to blend into any environment. His first stop was a storage unit on the outskirts of the city, a facility he'd rented under an alias 3 years ago, insurance against the day his two worlds might collide. Inside, wrapped in moisture-proof cases, were the tools of his trade, weapons that didn't exist in any inventory, identity documents that could survive deep scrutiny, and enough cash to disappear forever. Blake selected what he needed: a suppressed .45 caliber pistol, ceramic body armor that wouldn't trigger metal detectors, and surveillance equipment that belonged in spy movies. But his most important tool was his mind, a tactical computer that could process variables and outcomes faster than any silicon chip. His next stop was 2847 Maple Grove Avenue, the house he'd bought for Celia 12 years ago when Luna was 5. Blake parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through shadows and blind spots with the fluidity of a predator. The house looked different. New security system, reinforced doors, floodlights that swept the yard in programmed patterns. Troy Kellner had turned Blake's home into a fortress, but Blake had helped design defenses in hostile territory. Every fortification had weaknesses. You just had to know how to look. Blake spent 2 hours conducting surveillance, mapping patrol patterns, and identifying entry points. Kellner was good. He maintained security protocols even in his own home. But he was fighting the last war, defending against criminals and gang members who operated by different rules. Blake Morrison wasn't a criminal. He was a weapon of war. At 0347 hours, Blake's patience was rewarded. A figure appeared at the kitchen window, Celia, moving like a ghost in her own home. Even from 50 yards away, Blake could see the fear in her posture, the way she glanced over her shoulder before filling a glass of water. She wasn't a willing participant in this. She was another prisoner. Blake's tactical assessment shifted. This wasn't a simple case of betrayal and revenge. Celia and Luna were being held against their will by a man who'd manipulated his way into their lives. The divorce, the new marriage, all of it orchestrated by a predator who'd identified vulnerable targets and moved in for the kill. But that raised new questions. Why target Blake's family specifically? A police sergeant's salary couldn't justify this level of operation. Someone was paying Troy Kellner, and Blake intended to find out who. Blake activated a microdrone, a piece of military hardware that would be classified for another 5 years. The device was no bigger than a hummingbird, equipped with cameras and audio sensors that could penetrate most residential structures. The feed revealed Luna in what used to be Blake's home office, zip-tied to a chair but unharmed. Troy Kellner sat across from her, cleaning a service weapon with methodical precision. "Your daddy's going to come home soon," Kellner was saying, his voice carrying the false comfort of a practiced manipulator. "And when he does, we're going to have a conversation about respect, about knowing your place." Luna lifted her chin defiantly. "My dad's going to kill you." Kellner laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Your dad's going to walk through that door thinking he's some kind of hero. Special Forces training, Black Ops experience. Very impressive. But this isn't Afghanistan, little girl. This is my world now." Blake watched his daughter's face, seeing himself in her stubborn refusal to break. Luna had inherited more than his green eyes and sharp cheekbones. She'd inherited his iron will. "You don't know my dad," Luna said quietly. "You think you do, but you don't. He's not just a soldier. He's the monster that other monsters have nightmares about." Kellner's expression darkened. "We'll see about that." Blake pulled back from the drone feed and began planning his approach. Kellner expected a frontal assault, a desperate father making emotional decisions. Instead, Blake would give him exactly what he didn't expect, a systematic dismantling of everything Kellner thought he controlled. The war wasn't starting when Blake entered that house. It had started the moment Troy Kellner made the mistake of threatening Blake Morrison's family. Blake just hadn't been on the battlefield yet. Chapter 3. Into the Maze. Blake spent the remaining hours before dawn constructing a psychological profile of his enemy. Troy Kellner wasn't operating alone. The sophistication of his approach, the way he'd manipulated the legal system to insert himself into Blake's family, suggested resources and planning beyond a single corrupt cop. Blake's years in intelligence had taught him that every operation had puppet masters pulling strings from the shadows. Kellner was a weapon, not the hand wielding it. Using encrypted connections through VPN tunnels that would take federal agencies weeks to trace, Blake hacked into financial records, communication logs, and surveillance networks across Denver. What he found painted a picture that made his blood run cold. Troy Kellner was part of a human trafficking ring that specialized in military families. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Identify deployed soldiers with attractive wives and vulnerable children, insert an operative into their lives during deployment, manipulate the divorce process to gain legal custody, then disappear the family into a network that stretched across 3 states. Blake counted 17 families that had vanished in the past 2 years, all following the same pattern. Soldiers returning from deployment to find their families gone, their ex-wives remarried to men who'd since disappeared. Local police investigations stalled due to jurisdictional issues and lack of evidence. Celia and Luna weren't just being held hostage. They were merchandise waiting to be shipped. Blake's tactical assessment shifted again. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about extraction and elimination. Every minute he spent planning was another minute his family remained in mortal danger. But Blake had learned patience in the killing fields of 3 different wars. Emotion got soldiers killed. Calculation kept them alive. At 0600 hours, Blake's phone, a new burner device, buzzed with an incoming call from Kellner's number. Morrison. Blake's voice was flat, professional. Soldier boy, welcome home. I trust you had a pleasant flight. Where are they? Kellner chuckled. Safe and sound, don't worry. Your wife is quite beautiful, Morrison. I can see why you'd want to rush home. And your daughter? She's got spirit. That'll be useful where she's going. Blake's grip tightened on the phone, but his voice remained steady. What do you want? Simple trade. You for them. There's a warehouse at 3247 Industrial Boulevard. Come alone, come unarmed, and maybe your family walks away from this. How do I know they're alive? Because I'm a reasonable man. Hold on. Luna's voice crackled through the speaker. Dad, don't come. It's a trap. There are others here, families with. The line went dead. Blake smiled for the first time in 18 hours. Luna had just given him the intelligence he needed. Multiple hostages, confirming the trafficking operation, and most importantly, the knowledge that his daughter was still fighting. Blake had 2 choices: follow Kellner's script and walk into an obvious trap, or change the rules entirely. He chose option 3, burn it all down. Blake spent the next hour preparing for war. He rigged his storage unit with thermite charges that would destroy any evidence of his arsenal. He uploaded encrypted files containing everything he'd discovered about the trafficking ring to a dozen news outlets, intelligence agencies, and federal law enforcement branches, with automatic release triggers if he didn't check in every 12 hours. Then he called the one person in Denver he could trust, Detective Maria Santos, Luna's godmother and Blake's former military police partner from his early Army days. Blake? Jesus, where are you? There's been. Maria, I need you to listen carefully. In 6 hours, you're going to receive files that expose a human trafficking ring operating through the Denver PD. Troy Kellner is the primary operative. My family is being held hostage. Blake, slow down. Kellner is a decorated. He's a predator who's been using his badge to hunt military families. Check the missing persons reports for the past 2 years. Cross-reference with deployment schedules. You'll see the pattern. Silence on the line. Maria was processing, her detective instincts engaging. What do you need me to do? Stay clear of Industrial Boulevard until 0800 hours. Then come with everything you've got. And Maria, bring a trauma team. There are going to be casualties. Blake, whatever you're planning. I'm bringing my family home. Blake ended the call and checked his weapons one final time. He'd spent 12 years learning to kill efficiently, quietly, and without remorse. Tonight, he would use every skill the United States Army had taught him. But first, he had a warehouse to scout and enemies to identify. The sun was rising over Denver, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded Blake of other dawns in other wars. He'd always found it poetic that the most beautiful moments often preceded the most terrible violence. Today would be no exception. Chapter 4, The Devil's Playground. Industrial Boulevard was a graveyard of American manufacturing, lined with abandoned factories and rusted warehouses that spoke of better economic times. Blake approached the target building using storm drains and freight corridors, his movements invisible to the network of cameras he'd identified during his reconnaissance. The warehouse at 3247 was larger than most, with multiple entry points and sight lines that suggested military-grade planning. Blake counted 4 guards on the perimeter, their positions coordinated through radio communication and overlapping fields of fire. Professional work. Blake activated his drone again, sending it through a broken skylight to map the interior. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just a meeting point. It was a processing center. 23 hostages were secured in the main warehouse space. Men, women, and children separated into groups and guarded by armed operatives. Luna and Celia were in a smaller office space overlooking the main floor, zip-tied to chairs but unharmed. Troy Kellner paced between them and a bank of monitors showing the warehouse perimeter, a radio in one hand and a pistol in the other. Blake began counting heads and weapons. 11 armed men, military-bearing, coordinated movements. These weren't street criminals or corrupt cops. They were private military contractors, mercenaries with training that rivaled his own. But Blake had advantages they didn't know about. He'd been fighting outnumbered for 12 years, and he'd survived by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than his enemies. Today would be no different. Blake's tactical plan unfolded in his mind like a chess game. First, he would eliminate the perimeter guards using suppressed weapons and nonverbal takedowns. Then he would penetrate the interior and begin systematic elimination of the hostile operators while avoiding civilian casualties. But as Blake moved into position for his first kill, his phone vibrated with a text message: "Change of plans. Your wife wants to see you suffer first." Attached was a video file. Blake's blood turned to ice as he watched Troy Kellner force Celia to read from a prepared script. "Blake, I need you to understand something. I was never kidnapped. I was never forced. I wanted out of our marriage, and Troy gave me a way to make that happen profitably. Your daughter, she's going to learn what happens to military brats who think their daddies are heroes." The camera panned to Luna, defiant despite her restraints. "That's not my mom talking," she shouted. "He's got drugs, Dad. Don't believe." The feed cut to black. Blake's hands shook with rage as he processed what he'd seen. Kellner wasn't just trafficking families. He was destroying them psychologically before selling them. The drugs explained Celia's wooden delivery, the way her eyes had been unfocused and distant. Blake's tactical assessment shifted again. This wasn't just about extraction anymore. This was about complete annihilation of everyone involved in this operation. Blake moved like death through the warehouse perimeter, his suppressed pistol whispering as it spoke to the first guard. The man dropped silently, his radio secured before it could broadcast an alarm. Blake stripped the body of weapons and ammunition, adding to his arsenal. The second guard died reaching for his radio. The third never saw Blake coming. The fourth managed to get off a partial transmission before Blake's knife found his throat. Perimeter breach, Zone 4. Alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Blake smiled. Time for the direct approach. Blake charged through the main entrance as tactical lights flooded the warehouse floor. He moved through the space like a nightmare made flesh, his weapons finding targets with mechanical precision. The contractors were good. They maintained discipline under fire, used cover effectively, coordinated their response. But they were fighting a ghost who knew their playbook better than they did. Blake's first magazine took down 3 operatives before they could fully deploy. His second cleared a path to the stairwell leading to the office complex where his family was being held. Bodies fell around him as he advanced, his years of combat experience allowing him to process threats and eliminate them faster than human reaction time could track. But Blake's true advantage wasn't his weapons or training. It was his motivation. These men were fighting for money. Blake was fighting for family. When the last contractor fell, Blake stood in a warehouse filled with smoke and silence. 23 hostages stared at him with expressions ranging from terror to hope, their restraints already cut by Blake's tactical knife. "Police are coming," Blake announced, his voice carrying across the space. "Stay down until they arrive." Then he climbed the stairs to settle accounts with Troy Kellner. Chapter 5: The Heart of Darkness. Blake found Troy Kellner exactly where he'd expected, barricaded in the office overlooking the warehouse floor, using Celia and Luna as human shields. The setup was tactically sound. Blake couldn't take a shot without risking his family, and Kellner had a clear view of all approach routes. "Impressive work down there, Morrison," Kellner called out as Blake appeared in the doorway. 11 contractors in under 3 minutes. Your reputation wasn't exaggerated. Blake assessed the situation with professional detachment. Celia was semi-conscious, slumped in her chair with the glassy-eyed look of heavy sedation. Luna was fully alert, her eyes tracking Blake's movements with the intensity of a fellow predator. "Let them go, Kellner. This is between us." Kellner laughed, pressing his service weapon against Luna's temple. "Actually, Morrison, this is about much more than your family. You've been a problem for our organization for quite some time." Blake kept his weapon trained on Kellner's center mass, waiting for an opening that might never come. "Organization? Did you really think this was random? A corrupt cop who happened to target your family?" Kellner's smile was all teeth and malice. We've been tracking you for 18 months, Morrison. Your Black Ops career, your classified missions, your unique skill set. The pieces fell into place in Blake's mind like a tactical briefing. Private military recruitment. Bingo. The Crimson Syndicate specializes in acquiring talent from special operations backgrounds. Former operators who can't adapt to civilian life, who miss the action, who need an outlet for their particular talents. Blake's finger tightened on his trigger. And if they refuse? We find leverage. Family members make excellent motivational tools. Kellner's eyes glittered with sadistic pleasure. Your wife and daughter were going to be auctioned to the highest bidder. The proceeds would fund our recruitment of you. Luna's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You made one mistake. Kellner's attention shifted to her for just a moment. The opening Blake had been waiting for. But Luna wasn't finished talking. You assumed my dad would want to save us. Blake's shot took Kellner's center mass, the heavy caliber round spinning him away from Luna and into the reinforced glass of the office window. But Kellner wasn't done. His training kicked in as he fell, his weapon swinging towards Celia's head. Blake's second shot shattered Kellner's wrist, sending his pistol skittering across the floor. His third shot was insurance, ensuring Troy Kellner would never threaten another family. Blake cut his family's restraints with shaking hands, checking them for injuries while sirens wailed in the distance. Celia was breathing steadily, the drugs keeping her unconscious but stable. Luna threw her arms around Blake's neck, her composure finally cracking. I knew you'd come, she whispered against his shoulder. I told him you were coming. Blake held his daughter while his mind continued processing the tactical situation. Kellner was dead, the contractors were eliminated, the hostages were safe. But the Crimson Syndicate was larger than this single operation. They would come for him again. Blake's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Detective Santos. Federal Task Force incoming. Need you clear of the scene in 10 minutes. Blake kissed Luna's forehead and helped support Celia's unconscious weight. We need to move. Can you walk? Luna nodded, her teenage stubbornness reasserting itself. Dad, what happens now? Blake looked at the tactical destruction he'd unleashed, at the bodies scattered throughout the warehouse, at the evidence of a criminal enterprise that stretched across multiple states. Now we disappear. Chapter 6. Ghosts and Shadows. The safe house was a nondescript cabin in the Colorado Rockies, one of 7 properties Blake maintained under various identities. While Celia slept off the effects of Kellner's drugs, Blake and Luna sat by the fireplace planning their next move. We can't go back to our old life, Blake explained, his voice gentle but firm. The Crimson Syndicate has resources, connections, patience. They'll try again. Luna studied her father with eyes that held too much knowledge for 17 years. So what do? We become ghosts. New identities, new location, new life. The Army will classify you and your mother as deceased, training accident during my redeployment. Official records will show I died in the warehouse explosion. What warehouse explosion? Blake checked his watch. The one that's going to happen in about 6 hours, destroying all evidence of tonight's operation. Luna was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what Blake was proposing. Finally, she asked, what about the people who hired Kellner? What about the Crimson Syndicate? Blake's expression hardened. That's my problem to solve. Over the next 3 days, Blake orchestrated their disappearance with the precision of a military operation. New documents, financial accounts that couldn't be traced, a backstory that would survive casual scrutiny. Blake Morrison, Celia Morrison, and Luna Morrison ceased to exist. In their place emerged David Chun, a software consultant, his wife Rebecca, recovering from a nervous breakdown, and their daughter Amy, a homeschooled teenager with a gift for languages. But Blake's most important preparation was teaching Luna how to disappear if something happened to him. The syndicate won't stop looking, he explained as they practiced emergency protocols. If they find us, if something happens to me, you take your mother and follow these procedures exactly. Luna memorized escape routes, communication protocols, and financial access codes with the same intensity she'd once applied to high school French. She understood that this wasn't a game, this was survival. On their 4th day in hiding, Blake received encrypted intelligence from his DIA contact. The warehouse explosion had been attributed to a gas leak. 23 rescued hostages were providing testimony about the trafficking ring. Federal agencies were coordinating a massive investigation into the Crimson Syndicate. But Blake also received disturbing news. 3 families associated with the rescued hostages had been murdered in the past 48 hours. Professional hits designed to send a message. The syndicate was cleaning house. Blake made a decision that would define the rest of their lives. Instead of running further, instead of disappearing completely, he was going hunting. "I have to finish this," he told Luna as she helped him load weapons into a modified pickup truck. "If I don't, they'll keep looking. They'll keep killing families." Luna's response surprised him. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. Dad, I've been watching you plan this operation for 4 days. I know the target locations, the tactical approaches, the exit strategies. I also know you can't cover all the variables alone." Blake studied his daughter, seeing himself reflected in her determination. "This isn't a game, Luna. People are going to die." "Good," Luna said quietly. "They hurt Mom. They hurt other families. They need to die." Blake recognized the look in Luna's eyes. It was the same cold calculation he'd seen in his own reflection for 12 years. The army had created a monster in Blake Morrison. Now that monster had passed its nature to the next generation. Maybe that was what the situation required. Blake spent the next 6 hours teaching Luna the basics of surveillance, communication, and tactical support. She wouldn't be in the field with him, but she would coordinate intelligence and maintain overwatch from secured positions. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, Blake Morrison prepared to wage war against an organization that traded in human misery. But he wouldn't be fighting alone. The Crimson Syndicate had created a family of ghosts. Now those ghosts were coming for them. Chapter 7. The Hunt Begins. Blake's war against the Crimson Syndicate began with mathematics. Using intelligence gathered from the warehouse operation, financial records seized by federal agents, and communication intercepts provided by his DIA contact, Blake mapped the organization's structure like a targeting matrix. The syndicate operated in cells, each insulated from the others but connected through a network of handlers, financiers, and operational commanders. Blake identified 12 key nodes across 4 states, each representing a critical vulnerability in their network. His first target was Marcus Webb, the syndicate's primary recruiter operating out of San Antonio. Webb specialized in identifying vulnerable special operations veterans, using a combination of financial pressure and psychological manipulation to bring them into the organization. Blake and Luna conducted surveillance for 3 days, learning Webb's patterns and identifying his security protocols. Webb was careful, former Delta Force, paranoid about electronic surveillance, varied his routes and timing. But he had one weakness: arrogance. Webb believed his military background made him untouchable. He'd never faced an enemy like Blake Morrison. Blake struck on a Tuesday night as Webb left his favorite steakhouse. The attack lasted 17 seconds, long enough for Blake to disable Webb's security detail and extract him to a secured location, short enough to avoid police response. Webb's interrogation revealed the syndicate's recruitment methodology. They identified deployable military personnel with financial difficulties, seduced their spouses through manufactured encounters, then manipulated the divorce proceedings to gain leverage over both the soldier and the family. More importantly, Webb provided Blake with the location of the syndicate's primary trafficking hub, a ranch in rural New Mexico where families were held before being sold to international buyers. Blake left Webb's body in a dumpster with a message carved into his forehead: "Morrison sends his regards." The second target was Linda Castellanos, a family court judge in Albuquerque who expedited custody transfers for syndicate operations. Blake's approach was more subtle. A break-in staged to look like a burglary, Castellanos strangled with her own judicial robes. But Blake left evidence behind: financial records linking Castellanos to offshore accounts funded by the syndicate. Her death would look like a robbery gone wrong, but the investigation would expose her corruption and lead federal agents deeper into the organization. Luna coordinated intelligence from their mobile command post, tracking law enforcement response and identifying which agencies could be trusted. She'd proven remarkably adept at electronic surveillance, using skills that would have impressed her father's military intelligence colleagues. "Next target?" Luna asked as they drove through the New Mexico desert. Blake checked his tactical map. "The ranch. But this one's different. Active hostages, heavy security, multiple escape routes. This is a direct assault operation." Luna's expression hardened. "How many families?" Satellite imagery shows at least 40 vehicles. Could be 60 or 70 hostages. Then we're not just hunting anymore. We're liberating. Blake nodded, proud and terrified in equal measure. His daughter had inherited his tactical mind and his moral clarity. She understood that some battles were worth any cost. The ranch assault would require everything Blake had learned in 12 years of black operations. But it would also require something new. Trust in a partner who'd never been tested in combat. As they approached the target, Blake realized he wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting to create a world where Luna could live without fear, where families like theirs could exist without becoming merchandise for predators. The Crimson Syndicate had made one fatal error. They'd assumed Blake Morrison would follow conventional rules of engagement. They were about to learn otherwise. Chapter 8: Fire and Fury. The Sandoval Ranch sprawled across 800 acres of New Mexico desert, its isolation perfect for the Syndicate's operations. Blake spent 18 hours in reconnaissance, mapping guard positions, identifying security systems, and planning multiple assault routes. The intelligence was sobering: 26 armed guards, military-grade perimeter defenses, and communications equipment that could summon reinforcements from Albuquerque within 90 minutes. The hostages were held in converted livestock buildings, secured with electronic locks and monitored by closed-circuit cameras. Blake's tactical assessment was blunt: a frontal assault would result in massive civilian casualties. The guards had orders to eliminate hostages rather than allow rescue. But Blake had spent years learning unconventional warfare in environments where conventional tactics meant death. The ranch might be a fortress, but every fortress could be taken if you understood its weaknesses. Blake's plan unfolded in 3 phases: disruption, penetration, and extraction. Luna would coordinate from a position 2 miles away, using electronic warfare equipment to jam communications and manipulate security systems. Phase 1 began at 0200 hours. Blake infiltrated the ranch's power substation and planted thermite charges designed to create cascading electrical failures. The result was a progressive blackout that would appear to be equipment malfunction rather than sabotage. As emergency generators kicked in, Blake moved through the compound using night vision and suppressed weapons. Guards died silently as they investigated the power problems, their bodies hidden in locations that wouldn't be discovered until morning. Phase 2 required precision timing. Blake penetrated the main house where the Syndicate's operational commander, Vincent Moreau, coordinated the ranch's activities. Moreau was former French Foreign Legion, a professional soldier who transitioned to private military work before joining the Syndicate. Blake found Moreau in his communications center, frantically trying to contact his perimeter guards. The recognition in Moreau's eyes when he saw Blake was worth the risk of the entire operation. "Blake Morrison, I was wondering when you'd arrive. Where are the keys to the hostage facilities?" Moreau smiled, blood trickling from a split lip where Blake had struck him. "You're too late. The buyers arrive at dawn. Your family's friends are going to make someone very wealthy." Blake's interrogation of Moreau was swift and brutal, enhanced by techniques he'd learned from enemy combatants who understood the value of information. Within 15 minutes, Blake had access codes, facility layouts, and guard rotation schedules. He left Moreau alive, zip-tied to his chair with a thermite charge on a timer. Let the Syndicate commander contemplate his sins while his fortress burned around him. Phase 3 was liberation. Blake moved through the hostage facilities like an avenging angel, cutting restraints and guiding terrified families toward predetermined extraction points. The hostages were in various states of physical and psychological trauma, but they understood that Blake represented salvation. Luna's voice crackled through Blake's comm unit. Federal convoy approaching from the east. Multiple vehicles, tactical response team configuration. Blake smiled grimly. Detective Santos had received his anonymous tip about the ranch's location. The cavalry was coming, but Blake would be long gone before they arrived. The thermite charges detonated as Blake led the last group of hostages to safety, turning the ranch's main buildings into towering infernos that could be seen for 20 miles. 67 families were freed, Vincent Moreau was dead, and the Syndicate's primary trafficking hub was ashes. But Blake's war wasn't finished. As he and Luna drove away from the burning ranch, his encrypted phone buzzed with a message that changed everything. "Morrison, you've cost us a great deal of money. Time to settle accounts." Your wife is awake and very eager to see you. Come to the address below if you want answers about who she really is." Attached was a photo of Celia, fully conscious and unrestrained, sitting in a restaurant booth across from a man Blake recognized from intelligence files, David Ashworth, the Crimson Syndicate's founder and operational commander. Blake stared at the image, processing implications that made his blood run cold. Celia wasn't a victim in this operation. She was a participant. Chapter 9, Blood and Betrayal. The restaurant was an upscale establishment in downtown Denver, the kind of place where powerful people conducted business over expensive wine and perfectly prepared steaks. Blake arrived alone, his weapons concealed but accessible, his mind processing every possible angle of betrayal. He found Celia and David Ashworth in a corner booth, their body language suggesting familiarity that predated the warehouse operation by months or years. Celia looked up as Blake approached, her expression containing no trace of the drugged confusion he'd seen during the rescue. "Hello, Blake," she said calmly. "Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Blake remained standing, his hand positioned near his concealed pistol. "Start talking." Ashworth gestured to the empty chair. "Mr. Morrison, your reputation for directness precedes you. I'm David Ashworth, founder and CEO of Crimson Syndicate Solutions. Your wife is one of our most valuable consultants." Blake's tactical assessment shifted as the pieces fell into place. "How long?" Celia's voice was steady, professional. 3 years. Since your deployment to Syria. The entire marriage was a lie. "Not the entire marriage," Celia said quietly. "The first 9 years were real. But Blake, you were never home. Always another mission, another deployment, another war that needed fighting. Luna and I were afterthoughts in your life." Blake's anger was a cold, controlled thing. "So you sold our daughter to human traffickers?" Ashworth intervened. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, we recruited your daughter. Luna has shown remarkable aptitude for intelligence gathering and tactical analysis. Her performance during your recent operations has been impressive." Blake's blood turned to ice. "Luna's been working for you." Celia leaned forward. "Blake, everything that happened, the divorce, the custody arrangement, the warehouse operation, it was all designed to test you. The Crimson Syndicate needs operators with your skills, but we also need to understand your psychological profile, your tactical decision-making under extreme stress." Blake's hand moved toward his weapon, but Ashworth's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't, Mr. Morrison. Luna is currently in a secure location with several of our associates. Her safety depends on your cooperation." Blake forced himself to remain still. "What do you want?" "Your services," Ashworth said simply. "The Crimson Syndicate operates in the gray areas between governmental authority and private enterprise. We provide solutions for problems that conventional military and law enforcement can't address. You traffic in human misery." Celia's laugh was bitter. "We traffic in reality, Blake. The families at the ranch weren't random victims. They were all connected to military personnel who'd refused our recruitment offers. Their suffering was motivational." Blake's tactical mind was processing variables and outcomes at light speed. Celia had betrayed everything they'd built together. Luna was being held hostage to ensure his compliance. The entire operation had been designed to break him psychologically and rebuild him as a weapon for the Syndicate. But Celia and Ashworth had made one critical error. They'd underestimated Luna Morrison. Blake's phone buzzed with a text message. "Phase 3 complete. Extraction in progress. Trust me, Dad." Blake smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant. "You want my services? You've got them. But first, I want to see Luna." Ashworth nodded to someone across the restaurant. "She's being brought here now. Mr. Morrison, I think you'll be impressed by how well she's adapted to our training program." Luna appeared in the restaurant entrance, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. But Blake's trained eye caught details that Ashworth and Celia missed. Luna's escorts moved with the stiff awkwardness of men under threat, their eyes constantly scanning for exits, their hands positioned defensively rather than aggressively. Luna had turned her captors into her protection detail. As they approached the table, Luna made eye contact with Blake and mouthed a single word. "Now." Blake's suppressed pistol appeared in his hand like magic, the weapon tracking between Ashworth and Celia with mechanical precision. Around the restaurant, Luna's escorts revealed themselves as federal agents who'd been tracking the Syndicate leadership for months. David Ashworth, "You're under arrest for human trafficking, murder, and conspiracy," announced Detective Santos as she emerged from the kitchen with a full tactical team. Celia's composure finally cracked. "Blake, you don't understand. Luna agreed to work with us. She wanted to be part of something bigger than—" "Mom," Luna interrupted quietly. "I wanted to understand why you betrayed us. Now I do." Blake kept his weapon trained on Ashworth as federal agents secured the scene. "Luna, how long have you been working with law enforcement?" "Since the warehouse. Detective Santos approached me during debriefing. The syndicate needed to be destroyed completely, not just damaged." Blake holstered his weapon and pulled Luna into a fierce hug. "I'm proud of you. What about Mom?" Blake looked at Celia, seeing a stranger wearing the face of the woman he'd once loved. "Your mother made her choice. She chose money over family. That's not something I can forgive." As federal agents led Celia and Ashworth away in handcuffs, Luna asked the question Blake had been dreading. "What happens to us now?" Blake watched the woman who'd been his wife disappear into a federal transport vehicle, knowing he'd never see her again. "We rebuild. Different names, different life, but we rebuild. Just the two of us." Luna nodded, understanding that their family had been reduced but not destroyed. "And if anyone comes after us again?" Blake's smile was cold and predatory. "Then they'll learn what happens when you threaten a Morrison." Epilogue. 2 years later, David Chun and his daughter Amy ran a successful security consulting business in rural Montana. Their clients included wealthy ranchers, tech entrepreneurs, and occasionally, federal agencies dealing with situations that required unconventional solutions. Luna, Amy, had developed into a formidable intelligence analyst, her teenage experience with the Crimson Syndicate providing expertise that complemented Blake's tactical background. She'd never forgiven her mother's betrayal, but she'd learned to channel that anger into something productive. Blake had found peace in their new life, but he maintained the preparedness protocols that had kept them alive. The world was full of predators who mistook kindness for weakness, who thought family bonds could be exploited for profit. They were welcome to try. Blake Morrison was dead, officially and permanently. But David Chun carried all of Blake's skills, all of his ruthlessness, and all of his determination to protect the family he had left. Some lessons could only be learned once. The Crimson Syndicate had learned theirs completely.